it's Father Ted here for Father Ted Talks. Today I want to answer a question that actually a few questions that have come up the last little while about, kind of different traditions that we have in celebrating feasts. Specifically, some confusions that happen for example, when we celebrate name days and when we celebrate, for example, the feast of Saint Fanurios, which, as you know, is the patron saint of lost things, or when we celebrate memorials. So these kind of three things, the reason why I bring them up today is because I've had quite a few scenarios recently that people kind of seem to be confused on how to celebrate or what to practically bring to the church when we do these things. So first of all, I'm going to lay out just very, very basically the things that you need to bring to the church when you're celebrating either a memorial service, a feast day, like a name day, for example, of a saint, or you are doing something for Saint Fanurios. Of course, this comes up a lot here at my church because we have the side chapel of Saint Fanurios. So first of all, for memorials, when we want to serve a memorial at a church, we usually make koliva. Koliva is boiled wheat that we usually boil at home, and then we kind of arrange them in a tray, and they are mixed in with sugar, either brown sugar or icing sugar, sometimes candies, raisins, pomegranates, sweet things like that, nuts sometimes. And these things are mixed into the koliva, and they're made into a nice tray, and a lot of times they're covered or they're sprinkled with white icing sugar on top. Sometimes with either the nuts or with candies, there is the name or the initials of the dead person, the deceased person, that are put on the top. And so these are brought to the church. Of course, the reason why is because koliva are always a symbol of death and resurrection, right? The seed, as Christ speaks about in the Gospel of John, unless the seed first falls into the ground and dies, it cannot produce 100-fold. It cannot produce new life, right? So, of course, koliva represent us dying, but also then eventually resurrecting. It's our hope in the resurrection, and we make these as a memorial to those who have passed away. So we bring this kind of tray. We have to boil our own koliva. A lot of people, they don't know how to do it, and so a lot of times they may order them from bakeries and things like that. Of course, that's fine if you don't know how to do it. But of course, the ideal is to make it yourself, to pray for the person, to remember the person, and to put your love and your time into making it yourself, just like we should be making our own prosphoro, our own offering breads for Holy Communion, not buying them at bakeries. So we bring the tray or the bowl with the boiled wheat. Usually sometimes we put a candle into it that they light. And also it's customary to bring to the church an offering of a bottle of oil, which is used in the oil lamps of the church, and wine, usually sweet wine, to be used for communion. These are the offerings that we bring. Not so much, they don't have to do with the dead person or with the actual memorial, but the offering that we bring to the church as a thank you for the memorials being read. So sometimes people connect the oil and the wine because they see it at funeral services and the anointing of the body, and they think that it is part of the actual memorial service, but it's an offering that is brought incidentally along with the memorial service, right? So I say this because a lot of times people, when they bring their koliva, their wheat, to the church, and they bring oil and wine, when they book the priest or they ask the priest to go to the grave site for, let's say, a 40-day memorial or a one-year memorial, etc., they will bring koliva to the grave site, and they will bring oil and wine to the grave site, thinking that they need to pour the oil and the wine onto the grave site. But of course, that has nothing to do with the actual service. When you go to a grave site, you can bring a little bit of koliva if you want to, but you really don't even have to do that if you're doing a trisayon prayer at the gravesite. But you do not bring oil and wine. And of course, a lot of people continue to do this. Only when you go to the church for a memorial do you bring oil and wine as an offering to the church. So that's the proper kind of things that we need to bring to the church. And of course, also the names of the people that you want to commemorate. Make sure you write on a clear piece of paper. Write the names clearly and write in big letters on the top of the paper for a memorial, so that the board members and the people who are helping know that this is specifically for a memorial that is to happen at the end of the liturgy. So this is what we do. The reason why I bring all this up is because sometimes I've had the situation, rarely, but it happens, where somebody will show up with a piece of bread, a prosphoro. And we know, of course, the prosphoro is the loaf that we bake with a stamp on it, that is given inside to the altar to be used as an offering for Holy Communion. It is not for memorials. And so some people, they've shown up with a prosphoro and they stick a candle in it, And they say, here, Father, I've brought this for a memorial because I either didn't have time or I don't know how to make koliva. And so I just brought a Prosphoro. Maybe I made it myself, or I went and bought it at a bakery and I just stuck a candle in it. And, can you use this for memorial? And of course, my response is no, this is not appropriate. The Prosphoro is an offering for the living body and blood of Christ. It is not for commemoration of the dead. And so the Prosphoro we give into the altar for the proskomidi service, which is the preparation service. Please see my previous videos on that. And it is not for memorials. Sometimes people, they, for different reasons, they don't do it and they want to bring the Prosphoro for this reason. It's not good for us to accept this. People will say, well, I go to the other church and they don't care and they just accept it and they read my prayers. I said, okay, well, they might do this at another church, but that doesn't make it right. And just because, we can find a loophole somewhere else in the system doesn't mean that we should continue to do these things, because it doesn't make any sense to make a Prosphoro and then to bring it for a memorial, right? Don't bring Prosphora for memorials. Bring your koliva, bring your oil and wine, bring your names to do a proper memorial. So having said that, when we talk about the celebration of feast days in the Greek Orthodox Church especially, we have something when somebody is celebrating their name day, for example, like it's a feast of, let's say, St. Theodore, the commander, which is my patron saint. A lot of times people will do a service called an artoklasia, which is the blessing of the loaves. It usually involves baking kind of these bread loaves. They're not prosphora, they're usually just standard bread. Sometimes we'll have a cross on the top of it, but not always. Or sometimes we'll have powdered sugar on top of it, but it's just 5 loaves commemorating the multiplication of the loaves that Jesus did on the mountain when he fed the 5,000 people. And usually that is brought along again with oil and wine as an offering to the church. And the priest usually will commemorate the people who are living. This is not for the dead, this is people for the living who celebrate that particular name. And they will bring it usually in a basket or a tray, and they will put 5 candles on one of the loaves, usually the center loaf, and they will bring it usually to a Vesper service, but it can also be read at the end of an Orthros, a Matins service as well. It's not read during liturgy. And so we do this particular tradition in order to kind of like commemorate our loved ones who are celebrating their name days. So this is the proper thing, right? If you're going to do an artoklasia for a name day, you would bake 5 loaves of bread. There are different recipes and things like that online that one could find, and you would bring them to the church, and the priest will commemorate those people who are celebrating, and then you would cut them up and pass them out to the congregation at the end of the service as a blessing and as a way of sharing and offering in the joy of celebrating your name day or your loved one's name day. What happens is, again, some people, they will show up and they will conflate, for example, the name day of their loved one with the Fonduropita. What is the Fonduropita? Fonduropita is it's a type of cake that is made, especially in the Greek Orthodox tradition. I don't know if it's made in other Orthodox traditions, for Saint Fanurios, who is the patron saint of losing things, so of lost things, right? So sometimes people, if they are praying, maybe they've lost their job and they need to find a job, or somebody's missing in their family, God forbid, something like that, they pray to Saint Fanurios to find that which is lost, because he himself as a saint was lost for many years before he was rediscovered as a church saint. And so there is this Fonduropita that traditionally is made, which is usually a sweet cake with raisins in it, and is brought to the church and blessed in the name of Saint Fanurios when somebody's trying to find something, and it's passed out to the people. This is specifically, the Fonduropita is specifically for Saint Fanurios. It's not for any other name day or any other saint. What happens is that some people, they will bring me a Fonduropita and say, here, Father, I made a Fonduropita for my son who is like Saint John, who's John, for example, after Saint John. I'm like, well, the Fonduropita is for Saint Fanurios. It has nothing to do with Saint John, nor should it be made for name days of different saints, right? And people don't know that. They say, well, I take it to other churches and then they do it. Well, again, it's the same kind of thing. Just because we can get it done somewhere doesn't mean that we should. So, we have to understand, for what purpose do we make things? For what purpose do we, commemorate and use? There's different tools for different situations, right? So Fonduropita is only for Saint Fanurios. Artoklasia, the blessing of the loaves, the 5 loaves, is for other saints. Koliva are for the dead. And Prosphoro is to commemorate our loved ones and deceased as part of Holy Communion inside the altar. So these are all kind of different specific things, and it's important to keep them straight, to understand what everything is used for and to do the thing that is appropriate for that particular liturgical situation, right? Don't try to cross, cross the different traditions, or say, well, I was too lazy to make oliva, so I brought a Prosphoro, or I didn't want to make the artus, so I made a Fonduropita, or vice versa, right? This is not appropriate, and it confuses people, and it makes people, I guess you could say, minimize the importance of these ancient traditions, and by not paying attention to them, and not really taking the care to learn these traditions, and to spend the time to prepare the proper materials when we are doing the proper commemoration. So again, this is a short video, but I just tried to kind of put this together for you because a lot of people have been asking me about this, and I wanted to kind of make it clear on the things that we need when we do memorials, when we commemorate, when we want to bring a Prosphoro to the church for Holy Communion, when we want to do commemorate a name day, and when we want to pray to Saint Fandurios for something that is lost. Right? These are separate things, and they require separate things to be brought to the church. Right? Prosphoro, Koliva, Fonduropita, or Artus. Right? The breads. That's pretty much it. Feel free, if you have any questions, to email me at Fr.TEDTalks@gmail.com if you have more questions for further episodes. But until then, again, a blessed continuance on the Lenten journey. We're about halfway through the Lenten journey to this year's Pascha. So Kalina Nastasi for all of you, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. God bless.